Hi guys, Terabyte. Sorry about the delay between skating videos. It's hard for me to record them right now because of venue issues. That said, why don't we do some off-skates technique and body mechanics stuff. I recently saw Lulu Demon's blog post and video about her strong blocking stance. And there's a lot of things I really agree with in her on that, but there's one that I differ with fairly strongly about. So let's talk about what she wants you to do very quickly, and then see where I differ. She describes the problems with the normal derby stance in this way. Your feet tend to be wider than your knees, and your butt tends to be back, which turns off your core, and your shoulders tend to be far forward and it leaves you off balance to the front. It also makes it much harder to pivot because your head is forward of your center of balance and your head's heavy, as is your upper body. So her recommended fix is that you bring your feet in to probably about shoulder width. She didn't give an exact amount, but this is about where she was. That your knees stand stacked over your feet for the most part. That you bring your upper body back to be stacked over your hips. And most importantly, and I agree, you rotate your hips underneath in order to engage your entire core instead of just holding your back and your glutes, holding yourself up using your back and your glutes. By tucking underneath and having a little bit more straight, you don't need to be here and completely arch out, but tuck underneath just a little bit so that you stack your torso a little bit more. It engages all of the sort of core muscles around your hips. And that also helps you be a lot stronger because it starts accessing the power in your legs to keep your body where you want it to be. So the place where I differ from her is that I am not a fan of bringing shoulders to be stacked over the hips. Because if your hips get driven forward, all of a sudden you are in an arc position where your center of gravity is actually behind you, where it's much more difficult for you to control. And it also, in a lot of newer skaters, leads to people falling backwards. And I've seen a couple injuries in that way. And I would prefer not to see any more. So what I prefer is what I call a neutral stance. Like her, my feet want to be underneath my knees, and my knees want to be lively, like she was talking about. She called them being soft, but I prefer thinking about them as being alive and able to move and respond. Okay? And I want my hips tucked underneath just a bit so that I'm not sticking out. I'm not trying to find people just with my butt. And I am trying to find people with more parts of my body. But for me, the important distinction is shoulders. I like to keep my shoulders stacked directly over my knees and put my torso back a little bit to create that center of balance that's sort of in the middle of the feet. The reason for this is because I don't want my hips to get driven, especially if I'm blocking in a pair. I don't want my hips to get driven and then my partner pushes me and I go over. I also want to maintain options, because if I do need to come back, if I'm already all the way back, if I'm already seated on top of my hips, I cannot go back any further without coming behind the balance of my hips or of my feet. So I have to move my feet in order to safely do that. So to maintain options, I usually put myself at about like a 65 degree. It's not 45 and it's definitely not tabletop. Because of this, I maintain the option to come back and engage more of my body on the person I'm skating, or I also maintain the option to rather easily come underneath them or other things. There's one part of this that I'm not going to talk about today because I want to do another video on it very soon, which is what I call the box. And it's similar to the speed skating idea of nose, knees, toes, but set up for the middle. And it's also similar to what I think Bonnie calls the power box, though it's a little different in terms of what the implementation is. And that is that by stacking my shoulders over my knees, I create a square between these. And I also think about a connection between the opposing shoulder and the opposing knee. When you do this, You want to, if you move your knee forward, you want to bring the opposing shoulder forward with it for the most part, as long as you're remaining in a sort of forward stance. Even if you're sinking into like a single foot plow, you want to bring that shoulder with it, because what you're doing is you're setting up opposing strengths so that you can source power from across your body to push through or to push through. But if you leave this behind, now all of a sudden you've turned off most of this, and there's virtually no way for me to access power from here. We'll talk more about that later. But keep it in mind when you're thinking about this, that you're trying to create a square or a box with connection between the opposing shoulder and the knee. To review, you want to have your feet stacked underneath your knees, because that does give you options. If your feet are all the way out, you can't go out any further easily, right? So feet underneath the knees, because you can always bring them in, or you can bring them out. You want to have those muscles engaged, because bring your knees out also helps engage these muscles to support what you're doing with your torso. You want to have your hips under just a little bit, and you want to have your shoulders stacked over your knees. So we'll talk about the box a little bit later. And if you do skate with her strong stance, there's nothing wrong with it. This is just another option for you to consider. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I would like to suggest that you check out some of my skating tutorials as well. These are usually drills aimed at improving your foot coordination so that you can move from motion to motion well. And also that you click subscribe. I don't make any money off of this, but I do appreciate your comments. If you have any thoughts, any feedback, please let me know below. If you disagree with me, please tell me. I would love to hear your opinions.